Welcome to the Tales to Inspire podcast. Before we get started on this episode, I would like to invite you to our community so that you can hear more stories to inspire change within your life and positive change within the systems in which we live. All I want you to do is to click on the subscribe button. Your comments mean the world to us with anything that's resonated with you, and I absolutely love your support. I can't wait to go on this journey alongside you. Thank you so much for subscribing. Let's get into today's episode. Today's episode brings together a theme that can feel hotly contested within communities. Is it even real? How can we care about this when there's so much going on in our lives? Is it just a white, middle-class issue that only people with privilege can afford to prioritise? That topic is, of course, sustainability and climate change. In this episode, I'll be sharing snippets from 3 powerful conversations we've had with Tales to Inspire champions: Bea Thackeray, Hannah Cox, and Adam Bastock. Now, not every conversation we share will be easy to listen to. You might not agree with everything that's said, and that's okay. But what I do encourage is this: let's have better conversations, not from a place of right or wrong, but from a place of genuine dialogue. Because right now, too many conversations spiral downwards. What if we choose to host conversations that move us upwards instead? In episode 162, Bea Thackeray takes us into the world of sustainable design and asks some simple but very powerful questions. What defines a bad product? What defines a good product? And why are we still designing things with no long-term shelf life? She challenges single-use culture and asks whether some of the choices we've normalised simply make no sense anymore. There are some big challenges to solve, and science backs that up. 3 facts worth holding are that 1, global plastic production exceeds 430 million tonnes per year, and around 2/3 of that becomes waste within that short period of time. Less than 10% of plastic ever produced has been recycled. Number 2, the world generates over 2 billion tonnes of solid waste annually, and that figure is projected to increase by nearly 70% by 2050 if no major systemic changes occur. And number 3, according to the UN Environment Programme, if current consumption patterns continue, we will need the equivalent of almost 3 Earths by 2050 to sustain our lifestyles. Bea's message is not about guilt. It's about design, it's about systems, it's about building products and infrastructure that make sustainable behaviour the easy behaviour to take and to do.
So yes, I do think that as designers we have a responsibility of what we produce, because what we design gets made, sold, people are going to use it. We should really think about what is it we're making, what resources we're using to make that product, what materials we're using. You know, can we cut down on the amount of material on the packaging? My packaging is my main thing. And also, you know, what are people going to do with that product? How are they going to use it? And can they repurpose it? Or are they going to just throw it away at the end of the day? So what happens to it when it's thrown away? So those are the things that really sort of motivate me in terms of sustainability.
So then what's sustainable and what isn't? Like, what can humans are great at justifying things. We're brilliant. I do it all the time. It's all right. My diet's starting on Monday.
Yes.
It's only Tuesday now. But what's a justification, or what's the, you know, that is sustainable and that's okay, as opposed to this isn't?
Simple answer: single-use products,
right.
Disposable products are not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that, you know, there's going to be a real kind of mindset change, a behavioural change in the public conscience, because, you know, the governments are already banning certain single-use items like plastic straws, plastic cups and knives, forks. We're seeing those already disappearing. So it's kind of a matter of time before that starts to permeate into other areas. So, and also something that you can repair, because that is a huge issue, isn't it? And you buy something and it falls apart and you can't, you know, the battery or everything is actually part of the component. You can't get into it, you can't repair it. So yes, so it's what I would say bad would be single-use, disposable and non-repairable.
In terms of the industry that you're in and how sustainable it is right now, on that scale, where do you feel like we're at right now, and Yeah. Which direction do you think it's going?
Well, I'm hoping it's going in the right direction.
Right, okay.
There's legislation coming around the corner
Okay.
that is making producers of packaging responsible for what they produce. In the EU, they're already bringing in laws on repairability, so everything that's designed and produced has to be repairable.
Okay.
So I think there's a lot coming down the pipeline, and we're already seeing lots of like plastic in the shops already starting to diminish. I mean, I've always sort of go around the shelves at Easter looking at Easter egg packaging, and it's always really upset me when you've seen all the plastic inserts and and then it's just a hollow piece of chocolate in a massive box. But I've noticed this year a lot of the plastic has gone. That a lot of the big brands are producing plastic-free packaging. And they've not even got windows on, it's literally just the photo of the product on the front. So you can see that it's starting to happen in a good way.
The penny is finally starting to drop.
Yeah,
but isn't it true that like I see so much plastic around like bananas? Why do I need plastic around bananas? They're protected. Like, what are you doing putting plastic around them? Like, there's certain things and you just think it's absolute madness.
Yeah.
Like,
Carrots. I always have to take carrots straight out of the bags when I bring them home because they just start to sweat. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about this, I grew up in the 70s, so I can sort of remember a world before all this came in. And I used to get sent to the local grocers to buy fruit and veg. And the guy would be there surrounded by a whole array and a sort of weighing scale, like a metal dish. And you'd ask for all the different weights of apples and whatever. And he'd weigh it all, pour it into a paper bag, and he used to do this trick. He used to spin the edges. And if you bought potatoes, he would literally just pour them into your bag. So there was like no packaging at all. So I've kind of in my years, I've seen those things, this advent of supermarkets and convenience. But the one thing that I find quite irritating is seeing how plastic, for an example of sort of multi-packs of tins, whatever produce it is you're buying, used to be wrapped, or some of them still are wrapped in like a plastic sleeve. Yeah. And now they're being wrapped in paper sleeves. So are we actually replacing one material with another? And it doesn't really make sense. Why can't we just buy 4 tins at a reasonable price, then have all that sort of multi-purchase that has to be packaged?
Hannah Cox, founder of the Better Business Network and record holder for running 100 marathons in 100 days across India, brings a different lens in episode 164. Through her epic initiative, Project Salt Run, she aimed to raise £1 million for organisations including 1% for the Planet, Frank Water, Big Change and Client Earth. Hannah makes one key point. Sustainability is not a department in your business. It's not something you bolt onto your marketing or your CSR. It runs through everything, and she broadens that definition. Sustainability is environmental. Yes, but it's also social. It's financial. It's cultural. Now let's address something many of us feel. How many of us feel guilty about plastic packaging? About booking a flight? Our starting points are completely different. Yes, we can all do more, but here's the truth. The system is not neutral. For example, the fossil fuel industry has received hundreds of billions of dollars globally in subsidies each year, making carbon-intensive energy artificially cheaper. Major oil spills continue to cause catastrophic damage. The Deepwater Horizon spill released around 4.9 billion barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. The economic and ecological impact lasted for years. In the UK, sewage discharges into rivers remains a serious issue. In recent years, water companies reported hundreds of thousands of sewage overflow events annually, releasing untreated wasted water into rivers and coastal waters. The River Thames, once declared biologically dead in the 1950s, has improved, surprisingly, but pollution incidents and microplastics remain ongoing concerns. Across England, only a small percentage of rivers are classified as good ecological statuses. So when Hannah asks, where do I begin? It's not a small question. We cannot simply individualise a systemic problem. We must build better systems, and we must ask who designs them. let's not accept something simply because it's always been done that way. So in terms of sustainability then, and how we look at sustainability, I want to look at it from a few different perspectives within the society in which we live. So sustainability in the workplace. So how do you find companies that you work with, whether they're small, medium, large, how do you find in terms of their knowledge? Are they sustainable? Do they know where to begin? Are they trying to just tick boxes? So how is that space in terms of where they're currently at, and how do they go about navigating that?
I think the two biggest misconceptions I get from businesses is one, that sustainability is like a column, like your sales and marketing, your HR, your finance, and then there's your sustainability. And it usually comes after you've got all your ducks in a row for the other stuff. So they won't come to us often until they're like, right, we've sorted this now, we've got some money to think about sustainability. Whereas actually sustainability should be like a foundational kind of thought in everything that you're doing in your business. And also that it's just the environment, which I will also agree is what I used to think as well. So businesses that might be remote first businesses or service-based businesses will be like, what's sustainability got to do with us? We don't have any sort of like massive footprint on the environment. But actually sustainability, yes, it is about the environment, but it's also about how you treat your staff and how you treat your team. So having a sustainable business, you have to, one, be profitable, otherwise you're not going to be sustainable, you're not going to be future-proof if you're not commercially viable. But also it's about how are you looking after your teams. I mean, I've seen lots of companies that outwardly look like they're doing really good stuff or work with really good brands, but actually their staff are burnt out and they've got, are working weekends and evenings and hate their jobs and hate their bosses and, barely get any time off and expected to work long hours. And you're like, well, that's not sustainable for your workforce. So I think the misconceptions usually are you don't have time to think about it till you've got everything else sorted. And then it's just about the environment, because it's not just about the environment, it's about everything in the environment, which is everything. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. So then how do you educate people on that? Or is it actually, how does that even start? Because they're so far away from the actual true reality of what sustainability is.
I think it's hard because it's a Pandora's box, I think, sustainability. It certainly was for me. I originally thought when I started my previous business, if I work out my carbon footprint and we plant some trees, then we're being sustainable. And actually, we hadn't even considered how we should be lowering our carbon footprint in the first place, as an example. So I think it's about, like for businesses, it's about looking at where you can make the biggest positive difference as an organisation, and maybe thinking about, is sustainability even the word that we decide to use in our company, or are we just thinking about how we can have a positive impact as an organisation in everything that we do?
That makes so much sense. So I think we're going to go into a bit more on sustainability in the workplace in a little while, but what about outside of the workplace? What about in communities? Now, in communities, wide-ranging, I was at the Better Business Summit, and one of the things that was talked about was it's not an environmental battle, it's an economic one. So how do you make environment, actually that's my own fault, sustainability, because it's not about the environment, how do you make sustainability matter to people who it's pretty low down on their list?
And in what context? Why is it low down on their list? Because
they need food on the table. They need to support their families. Essentially, it's down usually the economic battle in terms of the individual. There may be other communities where it's low down on their list because they just don't care about it or they're not educated. But for now, like the economic side of things, how do you make it matter?
Well, that's the common misconception that usually those people aren't the ones being unsustainable. They're the ones that are probably not spending loads of money on stuff they don't need, probably not over consuming because they don't have the money to do so. It's the responsibility of people who have the power. We all have power, we all have a vote, but it's also about us accepting where we sit in the privilege scale of how much we can care about environmental issues and economic issues. So I always say, do what you can with what you have when you can. My expectation for what I'm able to do as a single person with no dependent children, for example, and no massive mortgage over my head, as someone that was lucky enough to go to university, I'm in a much easier position to be thinking about that day to day than somebody like my sister who her and her husband have got 4 children under the age of 10, who are living in a much more expensive part of the UK. And when she's shopping, and we've had this discussion before, you know, she's like, well, I feel guilty when I buy, you know, stuff in plastic packaging. And my argument is, well, you shouldn't feel guilty. It shouldn't be sold to you in that plastic packaging. As a really just small, micro, you know, example of responsibility when it comes to sustainability. It's interesting because I think the more power you have, the more you should be trying to change the status quo. But then I also feel that people who might have more economic challenges to deal with actually feel less empowered to be able to do anything, but actually they've got a lot of power in how they vote with their time and resource, but when they can. For me, there's no expectation that everybody should be doing exactly the same when it comes to sustainability.
I think that's such a good answer because it's not a one rule fits all for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, the word guilt is definitely associated with the word sustainability. I think there's a lot of people, if you say the word sustainability and how sustainable you are, instantly guilt comes up because I'm like, I could be doing more, I should be doing more. Actually, the power can be in, the system's screwed. Like the system is not built for sustainability. It's not built, and this is, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about life. It's not built for people to live happily and joyfully. It's not built for, You've taken the word sustainability and you've taken it out of the environment and you've said actually, for workplaces, you've said, it's actually how do people not be burnt out? How do you sustain the workplace? How do you sustain or make better the society in which we live?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the tagline. We've just had a load of new promotional material done for the network and it says, we help fix the broken system, join us. So it's like, it's a realisation, and without being like too lefty and woke, like capitalism does not account for the fact that we don't have infinite resources on the planet. Capitalism relies on the fact that everything is infinite and we can just use up as much as we can and make it like, that's not the reality of the environment we're in. Resources are finite, so we're working within a system that doesn't account for the fact that we don't have infinite resources. So the system is broken. And yes, the system is broken if people are struggling in what is a developed country like the UK. As far as I'm concerned, you know, what is even a developed country when you've got people in America, which some would say is a really developed country, not being able to afford healthcare and not going to the hospital or when they need to go to hospital or crossing borders to buy insulin. So I was about being like, what actually is a developed country? What actually is the correct system for us to be in? And just because we're in a system now that's not working, why are we just accepting it?
In episode 166, Adam Bastock offers yet another perspective. He brings in the financial side. He talks about reducing short-term pressures while thinking about the long term. He also calls out the buzzwords because sustainability can go in any direction. Net zero, carbon neutral, ESG, offsets, the language can be really overwhelming. Adam's key point? We need to tell a better story. Fear alone is not a motivator. Fear either causes action or it causes people to freeze. And here's where the science sharpens the conversation. The Paris Agreement aims to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Why 1.5 degrees? Because the difference between 1.5 degrees and 3 degrees Celsius is not small. At 1.5 degrees, heat waves intensify, coral reefs decline dramatically, and at 3 degrees, extreme heat becomes far more frequent. Crop yields decline more severely, and sea levels rise even further, increasing coastal displacement. Climate-related migration and conflict risk rise significantly. We are not debating a decimal point. We are debating the scale of impact. And Adam reminds us that sustainability must make sense financially, socially, and practically. Otherwise, it will not scale.
Yeah, so I think sustainability is one of those key words that gets used quite a lot. But for me, it really is about, we typically work with small businesses. So it's how do we get sustainability into each part of the business? And that might be ethical and sort of environmental, but for me it's also got to be financial. It's about how does your business operate in a way that means that you're going to exist in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and kind of the pressures that you might be facing in the next 6 months as well. How do we alleviate that very quickly with sustainability actions? So I think that's where sustainability is such a big phrase, you can go in any direction with it. In the, you know, I could spend ages talking about financial sustainability and the importance of attracting new customers and marketing and how you tell your message there, or it might be equally something like B Corp and already into kind of buzzword bingo. Things like B Corp or different like systems like that, where you go, actually, how do we make sure that our product is ethical and social and is aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals, whatever it is. So this isn't really answering the question, because I think it's so big. So that's why I think for me sustainability is, how do we make sure that a small business is going to exist and be profitable and successful in the next 12 months through sustainability. For me, that is mostly through things like carbon reduction, because of the benefits that will bring and the need for that at a kind of global scale over the next 5 to 10 years.
So you kind of explained on a small scale there how big sustainability is, and there's certain parts where it's so big that an ordinary person walking down on a street, you say the word sustainability and it switches them off, right? They just completely cut off to that. How do we stop that from happening?
Yeah, I think this is when, but for me, the answer is marketing, because we need to tell a better story, and that story needs to be better so that people buy into it and they understand what it means. An example of that would be something like plastic free. There's a report that came out in The Guardian about 2 months ago, where 53% of people, or something like that, couldn't define what single-use plastics were. So we take that in the sustainability world as an assumption that people know what that is and that it's very obvious and that it's a really bad thing and we need to move away from it. However, we're in a position where 50% potentially, and it's quite a small study obviously, of the UK do not know what that actually means, or more importantly, the benefits of it not being single-use plastic. And I think that's where, if we want to scale the adoption of sustainability to a point where it has positive impacts and is a better world, we need to sell those benefits far better than we are doing at the minute. We've known about climate change for 30 years, is kind of the if I'm being generous. There are studies going back about 150, 200 years on this, that people knew the impacts of burning coal, putting CO2 into the atmosphere and the impacts of that. Yet we're still at a point where greenhouse gas emissions are increasing year on year. Happy to define any of these terms as well, because I realise I am going off on one. But each year that has gone up. So the movement, if you want to call it that, the sustainability industry has fundamentally failed at moving hearts and minds to a point where we're taking action on that in a kind of mass, ambitious level. Yes, governments have a role to play, yes, corporates have a role to play, but ultimately I think if we can get the story right, and that is at a very small level of if you've got a small business who's selling wine or something like that, and going, well actually, this wine is great because it's sustainable. We're not at that point in the minute. We're talking about wine in a way that might be, or whatever the product is, in going, this product is sustainable. And it's like, well, who cares? Like, what does that mean to my actual daily life? And there's a big issue here around the broader marketing or selling or sales messages of, if we're looking purely at carbon emissions as sustainability, well, don't fly, don't eat meat, don't drive a car, don't go on holiday, don't have fun. It's a very negative loop, which is why people push back against it and go, well, actually, I'm not that interested now. And I think you need to flip those to go, well, actually, it's about taking longer holidays that happen to be by train, or it's taking, getting your employer to give you more holiday pay and more budget to then go on those longer holidays that are low carbon or whatever it might be, and having fun with it and making it interesting and selling the benefits to the individual kind of user or customer and their daily life, rather than it being this big sort of social thing.
Because that message, essentially what you're saying is, it needs to be simpler.
Yeah.
And it needs to be more direct and more visible to say, this is the benefit it gives to you and this is why. And and I don't think we're there right now.
Miles away. And I think direct is the key word, and it's a frustration of mine that I have within the sustainability movement, where a lot of people say we need more education on climate change. And I fundamentally don't agree, because I think education is slow, and how many people actually want to go and sit in a classroom and spend more time learning about something that is quite negative. We don't get educated on a Range Rover or a Lamborghini. People want Range Rovers and Lamborghinis because they're gaining a status of owning or being seen with that brand or whatever it is. Therefore, we need to that's inspirational, and people want that, right or wrong. They are unsustainable cars and they're bad in that sense, but yet people want them, and more people want that than they do sort of eco-action potentially. So how do we flip that round and go, well, actually, here's the sort of status gain, here's the inspiration for you to live a better life that happens to be sustainable as well, and sell that dream and sell that kind of gain. Because I think at the minute we're miles off in terms of it's not direct. We're not directly linking the benefits of that action to people's lives.
And what you're talking about there is culture change. It's actually changing cultures.
Yeah.
You know, so that actually the way that we think, the way that we are, changes. Now that sounds deep and that sounds really, really big. However, COVID changed the way our culture changed, like that.
Yeah.
You know, and it can happen. People say, "Oh, you can't change cultures like that," but you can if there's a big enough meaning behind it and a powerful enough message. So I think it is definitely possible. But what about the scaremongering or the doom? Everything, the world's going to end, this is going to happen, this is what you need to do, the polar caps and everything's melting, the seas are going to rise and the coastal towns are not going to be here anymore. That's another way that just switches the regular everyday person off. Is there a better way to go about this?
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult one. Because I think fear is not a motivator. So from a marketing point of view, putting that sort of selling that message, you would remove that and just go, look, this is how it's going to impact your life. These are the benefits to your life as a result of that. That's my gut reaction to that question. However, there is a concern there that then it's actually really important and we do need to have awareness of the alarm and the scale of the issue we are facing and the rapidity of that hitting. And I don't think people really know what it means. Again, it's that direct relation to their daily lives in that what does 1.5 degrees or 3 degrees look like in your personal life? I think if people realise that, they would be terrified and they would act quickly in a way that with COVID they made dramatic reductions to their lives to protect their daily safety. Yes, the state has a role to play in that. Yes, everyone has a role to play in that. It's not just on the individual, so that's a really key message to get across as well. Yeah. But ultimately it is a system and those individuals influence the systems as well, the policy, the state actors, whatever it is. Again, going very deep, and so it's not a lecture, don't worry guys. But I think it is that challenge of how do we, how do you walk the line between educating people on the severity of the problem of climate change and selling them the idea of action in an inspirational way that means they want to do it. And I don't think we're there yet, because we're still at the point of going, well, actually, you should feel bad because you're flying every now and then. The reality is you're probably flying because it's 10 times cheaper than getting the train. Yeah. So how do we handle that messaging?
So what do we take from Bea's, Hannah's and Adam's story? Sustainability is not just about polar bears. It's not just about recycling. It's not just about the shame. It's about systems, stories and design. And courage. If we want hope, we need action. Here are 3 positive starting points. Let's move from guilt to curiosity. Instead of asking, am I doing enough? Ask, what system am I participating in and how can I influence that system? Number 2, use your influence where you already are. Whether you're a business owner, a teacher, a parent or an employee, ask one question this month that nudges you towards a better environment moving forwards. Number 3, tell better stories. Fear divides, hope mobilizes. If sustainability is framed only as catastrophe, people switch off. If it is framed as possibility, better health, cleaner air, and thriving communities, people lean in. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Sustainability is not about perfection. It's about participation. It's about recognizing that the future is not something that happens to us. It is something that we shape. Let's keep the conversation going. Thank you for watching today's episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please leave a comment in the comment section below, and we cannot wait to see you for our next episode.